Doesn't this look like an Amazon rainforest clearing? But it isn't. It's closer to home. The Palappilly ground in Kerala is actually a cricket ground built by a plantation company for its workers decades ago. Here's how cricket, the favourite sport in South Asia, is celebrated in the midst of the wilderness that surrounds the grounds. Welcome to Kaleidoscope, where we bring you positive, daring and different news. On the show today, the power puzzle, pride and perspective, and we visit the Museum of Disgusting Food. Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Do follow, subscribe and like us for more. To our wonderful partners on the show, Srilanka Live, CDB and The Daily Morning, thank you.
She wins with CDB Wings, exclusive financial solutions for women.
Looking back at the week that was on CDB Snapshot, Sri Lanka's tea exports climbed to 21.87 million kilograms in May, with FOB value gaining to just over 1,800 rupees per kilogram. The Sri Lankan government addresses human-elephant conflicts by recruiting village guards to manage threats. Clean Sri Lanka sets its sights on renovating 50 major bus stands across the island. Maido in Peru, serving Nikkei cuisine, is crowned the world's best restaurant for 2025. Scientists discover that orcas groom each other with kelp, a process now named allokelping.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
Welcome, this is Srilanka Life News Capsule. A key benchmark, cost-reflective electricity pricing, in the March 2023 IMF program is under our microscope today. The governing law requires the regulator, the PUCSL, to set the cost-reflective tariff when the executive authority, the CEB, requests a price revision. Has this happened? What are the IMF conditions? Is the PUCSL and the IMF seeing eye to eye? The head of governance and anti-corruption of Verite Research, Sankita Gunaratna, a Shivening scholar and former board member of the Anka coalition, joins us with some answers. We've been seeing electricity pricing going up, down, in, out. How does this pricing actually happen?
How the law is set out, Savithri, is that the regulator, the PUCSL, is who is empowered by law to set the tariff upon a request by the Ceylon Electricity Board. So that has now recently been done, and the new tariff revision is now in place as of the 12th of June. So what is important to note, that by law it is the regulator, that is the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka, that has the sole authority to set the tariff in place.
Why is there a difference in pricing when it comes to what the PUCSL says and what the IMF wants?
Right, it's a very important question that you're asking, because this whole issue of electricity tariffs and pricing became central to the IMF's agreement with the government. Sri Lanka's agreement with the IMF contains a structural benchmark that says that Sri Lanka needs to carry out cost reflective pricing. In the structural benchmark with the IMF, there is a reference to an automatic adjustment. This is not part of the PUCSL's own methodology, and the way in which the IMF calculates whether the tariff is cost reflective also differs from the PUCSL. So the question is then, how is it that the regulator sets the tariff methodology, which has been set in 2021, and then at the same time the government has gone and agreed with the IMF to a different way of calculating what is still termed cost reflective pricing.
So within the rule of law, what would be the solution to correct this anomaly?
So the question is really, how can the government and the IMF really subvert the locally, legally empowered regulator in entering into such a structural benchmark? It shouldn't be a case that you subvert the local regulator, you try to outsmart or sidetrack the local regulator and go and agree with the IMF. The PUCSL has been set up as an independent authority, and that independence is given to the PUCSL for a reason. It is given in trust for the people. It is given so that it is not only power that is given to you, but is also a responsibility that you carry out in trust. So it is really up to, on the one hand, for the PUCSL to make its views known to the government, to the IMF, and overcome this impasse. But it is also for the government to ensure, when it deals with the IMF, to not allow, for whatever political reason or economic reason, for the rule of law not to be undermined. We cannot let local law be overridden at any cost.
So let's take a look at our markets this week. The All Share Price Index at the Colombo Stock Exchange recorded a significant upward movement in line with gains observed across global markets following tensions abating in the Middle East. Oil prices fell by 5% and remained below $69 per barrel after Israel agreed to a ceasefire with Iran after nearly 2 weeks of conflict. Gold hit a 2-week low this week and dropped to $3,300 level as the announcement of a ceasefire between Iran and Israel diminished safe haven demand. Time to visit the largest cave in the world, Vietnam's Son Doong Cave, stretching over 9 kilometers and big enough to house a 40-story building. It has its own weather system, rainforests and clouds. So we conclude Pride Month now, but beyond the parades and the posts and the likes, the quiet personal revolution of living truthfully is a must, and the bold act of questioning the systems that only seems to celebrate us when it suits them, that's not all. Brandon Ingram is no stranger to that tension. As an acclaimed author, actor and an LGBTIQ activist, his work confronts identity not as a slogan but as a lived experience. He writes, he reflects, he questions, and he challenges us to do the same. And Brandon is on Kaleidoscope Let's Talk today, discussing visibility, silence, and what it means to be who he is. So we've seen Pride Month celebrated everywhere, but how much of what we see is actually genuine and how much is corporate rainbow washing?
That it's interesting to watch brand participation, corporate participation within the month, because I observe to what degree people just seem to be paying lip service to what is going on, and to what degree there's active involvement in changing someone's life or doing something meaningful because you really want to stand by it. May I give you an example? Vaseline in Thailand, I think a few years ago, actually developed a skincare product for transgender women who are moving through the transitioning process, because they identified together with the transgender community that that process and all of the hormones that you end up taking dry your skin in a way that is really very tough to come back from. That is something that you can truly stand by as someone who represents the brand and say, we did something that was truly meaningful to the community, not just like a full page ad or a Facebook post that says like, Happy Pride Month, we're with you.
We live in a very hyper digital era. How do you strike the balance between being out there, like you said, and also protecting the right to your private life?
One thing I think I heard maybe Seth Godin say along the way is, why do you end up putting up the kind of material that you end up putting up on your social feeds? And I think intention is very important, right? And if the intention is about likes and comments and validation in that sense, it is a clear representation of the fact that it's not something that you are getting like in real life. But I think that if your intention is actually about talking about body positivity, or talking about same-sex relationships, or talking about the way that something you're doing is shaping culture, in that context, you kind of understand what is important to put out there because you are a part of shaping something, versus putting something out there that is deeply personal to you just because you want the validation.
Do you feel pressure to be an ambassador for your community just because you are out there, because you have come out with your identity?
Those of us who do have voice, who have carved out a platform to speak for ourselves and also for the larger community, we should be doing that work. But I think again that should come from an authentic I want to do it place. I believe that the work I'm doing is lived through my life. I want to be seen in the things that I do. I want to be heard in the conversations that I have in this way, which I think to a degree are, for me, impactful in the same way that it might be impactful for someone who cannot do this, perhaps, to be out on the street holding a placard and, protesting in that way. There's different ways to approach activism.
Do you really think that Western influence has actually hindered the whole context of the LGBTIQ community here?
Western influence has, not done us justice in the right way. Why I do think it's important is because if all of that stuff hadn't come through, everyone who identified as being part of the community wouldn't have had a reference point to kind of say, oh, that's me too, right? This is my life. I see myself in that.
What is the one action, small or large, that each of us can do to get to where you just mentioned?
Be a little more open-minded, I think. The world could just use with a little bit more kindness at every given point, understanding that regardless of what you may have been through or what you think you know, you don't even know the people that you know, right? I function in an organization that is very inclusive, and yet I'm the only person that I know that speaks of myself in this way and has no problem talking about my sexual identity. And I know that it is statistically impossible that I am the only one. And that kind of gives you an idea of how even in spaces that are about championing inclusivity, we're probably not doing all that we can to say, I see you, I hear you, I feel for you. I think all of that just boils down to be more empathetic.
What is the most disgusting thing you've ever eaten? Well, in Malmö, Sweden, that question becomes a full-on sensory experience. I ventured forth to Malmö to check out the Museum of Disgusting Food, where the weird, the stinky and the stomach churning take center stage. This offbeat museum is home to over 80 of the world's most unusual and often revolting food. China probably tops the charts, eating horseshoe bats, bull penis, century eggs, spicy rabbit heads and the ancient form of eating live monkey brains. And there's some cheeses like Sardinia's baby goat cheese and maggot-infested ones. Human corpses decaying in honey. Anyone for Rocky Mountain oysters? Well, we serve up bull testicles with a side of pork brains maybe. Greenland's freshly disemboweled seals stuffed with Arctic birds. There's fermented sea herring and there's balut, boiled duck egg with a partially developed fetus. Insects of all shapes, sizes and colors, and even a cake made of flies. Wash all this down with a selection of beverages. Sweden's Bavagal, a stout made of beaver anal gland juices. Poland's drinking sauerkraut. Fermented horse milk, cow urine, China's baby mice rice wine, and the Mongolian Mary, sheep eyeball juice in tomato sauce. So, plug your nose, prep your stomach and prepare to see and maybe taste the world's most revolting food. Because at this museum, disgust is truly in the eye of the beholder. We will see you in a new month next week.